Today, we're talking about love, acceptance, and appreciation for ourselves. It's such a crucial aspect of our healing, our growth, our development. It's so essential because you have to be able to love yourself before anyone else can do so. I mean, maybe someone can love you to some extent, but if you hold a lot of the emotional wounding or trauma, you carry that from your childhood and from other parts of your life, it can create these profound barriers that can prevent you from, to a large extent, loving and being loved. So today I'm joined by Kertia Jané, and we met on a podcast just yesterday, and so we had such a wonderful conversation. I asked her if she would join me today, and so Kersha, will you tell us a little about yourself and tell us about the podcast you're conducting? Because I encourage you as well. Go check it out. Mm.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Sure.
Yes, I am Kertia Jané. I am a writer, an entrepreneur, and host of The Other Side of Your podcast. And on the podcast, we discussed the disconnect between us and our ability to be our be our authentic selves, to own our desires, and to being in alignment with our purpose. So we explore a lot of that, a lot of the mindset, mindset issues, limiting beliefs, the stories, the narratives that we often operate from that has been a great hindrance for a lot of us on our respective journeys. So, pretty much that's what we talk about. And we just encourage others to live authentically and to remind people that there are limitless possibilities on the other side of fear.
Mhm. So, as I said today, we're talking about the importance of being able to love, accept, and appreciate ourselves. And a lot of us run into tremendous difficulty here because I think, as I've said so many other times, for the most part, our parents are doing, not always, but for the most part, the best they can with the resources and understanding that they possess. But in many instances, they're struggling with their own challenges, either trying to survive, to support us, to provide for us. Many of their own needs have not been met. Many of our parents themselves have been subjected to various forms of abuse, and so are therefore deeply wounded, possess these deficits. And so, again, say we have a lot of our basic needs may not be met somewhere along the way, and in some instances, we're subjected to could be verbal, emotional, physical, even childhood sexual trauma, and or some combination thereof. And the fact that most of us, all of us, actually, we lack the resources, the understanding of what's going on. We don't know how to cope with that or process it. In many instances, we go into kind of survival mode. But we grow up with these experiences, either needs not being met, sometimes subjected to various forms of abuse, and often not knowing any better, having a limited understanding, we tend to blame ourselves.
Mhm.
And because we experience these abuses, this mistreatment, or needs not being met, or parents are just so overwhelmed with what they're dealing with, and we feel it's something about us, like, but in addition to growing up in the home, as we're gradually becoming a part of the world around us, as we enter the educational system, as we go to school, oftentimes many of us were subjected to mistreatment of one form or another, bullying, maybe we were ostracized, even things like many of us have the experience of being like the last to be chosen when they, all the kids would line up. You'd have somebody and they would choose, I want this person and that person and that person, and choosing for sports teams. And it could be kind of humiliating.
Mhm.
And depending on, I noticed a profound difference. I remember in my 20s, I worked a few times as a substitute school teacher, and I could, even then, I could see the difference. Some children who had more resources available to them, and yet see some of the children, especially some of the children coming off the reservations, and I don't know for sure the individual family background, but having lived in some Native American communities and sometimes the heavy alcohol consumption, some of the dysfunction I would see playing out. And I would see how some of these children struggled. And and I would try to encourage them. I mean, even just if it meant just explaining how to do math problems or how to think, how to resolve certain, um, what, for lack of a better term, just academic challenges that they were facing there, how to think. And once I did so, they could come up with the answers on their own. But a lot of times, because we have these deficits and our needs were not being met, it's we struggle. We're dealing with this emotional wounding, and it consumes so much of our resources that it impedes our development. We often don't develop. Well, that is
Yeah.
fully, it's arrested development. But there's also the fact that even as early as childhood, I began to form these boyhood crushes, and I know many others. But especially by the time we're become adolescents, we're developing these attachments, and we have these basic needs to love and be loved. And there's some of us are more and some are less attractive. Not all of us meet those standards of what would be considered beautiful or handsome. And those who possess those physical attributes tend to get a lot more attention. And then those who don't get less attention. And that can be difficult. That could be painful as well.
Yeah.
And we just, again, maybe we assume that we're bad or defective or unlovable or something's wrong with us, or which is not the case at all. It's just, and even as we grow into adulthood, there's the fact that a lot of men and women, the mate selection criteria can be quite superficial in many instances.
Mhm.
A lot of men are just notorious, for just looking or for physical attributes, um, anything from hip to waist ratio, or how physically endowed a woman is, or cheekbone structure, or whatever.
Yeah.
But and yet it's totally ignoring these other qualities of, does she have the capacity to be a loving, caring partner? Is she trustworthy? Does she have this capacity to care, and even someday to be a good parent? There's so many qualities, and then on the other side, with women here, you see instances of, you look at even a lot of the dating apps, and a lot of women are selecting men who are at least as tall as they are, but often like 6 feet or taller. And well, there's only so many men to go around who are at that height. And and also, was it on Tinder or something? There is a dramatically higher incident of women swiping, especially 20-something women swiping uh, right. If the man had higher educational achievements, say like had a master's or above. And
Yeah.
so what happens is you have this smaller pool of what you call high value men and women. And then you have all this other larger section of the dating pool that's like uh, maybe, I guess you'd say, considered lower value. Not that
Yeah.
they are, and and are often overlooked and don't feel that they're receiving the love, and they're not getting the attention, and it could be very difficult. And again, because we don't fully understand or grasp what's happening, often we blame ourselves, we feel bad about ourselves, we ruminate about it, it evokes all these emotions, and it's it can be self-destructive. And even more so, we're going on Instagram, we're scrolling, and we see all these people with their supposedly picture perfect lives
Yeah.
and perfect relationships and sculpted bodies, and then we compare ourselves to that, and it's can be very self-destructive. And
Hmm.
so, Kershaw, what do you have to say?
Definitely agree with a lot of what you just said. Just starting back from when you mentioned what we experience as children and our parents, you know, of course, in their best, with their best intentions, trying to do the best that they can for us. But unfortunately, oftentimes, they've exhibited behaviors that has resulted in some level of trauma for
Mm,
us, whether it be feeling unloved, whether it be neglectful behavior, some sort of abuse, verbal abuse. For example, I, for one, I can tell you that I've experienced verbal abuse from my parents. And um, at the time, when I spoke to them about it in my adulthood, they expressed that, we didn't expect you to take it that seriously. But I'm just like, you say something enough to a child, they begin to believe it.
yeah.
That is true, right? So at the time, they didn't understand the kind of harm they were inflicting on me with their words and with their actions. They just thought that we just want the best for her and we're trying to do the best that we can do to raise her. But instead of parenting me in a loving way, they thought that parenting in a harsh way was more effective. And that was, of course, because of the type of parenting they also received.
Yeah.
So, I spoke to you earlier about this, how, a lot of these things goes into the identity that we all develop. When you're a child, you are still a sponge. You're soaking up a lot of things in your environment. Your brain is still developing.
Mhm.
So when you have someone speaking words to you, you of course absorb that, and that of course becomes a characteristic that you ascribe to who you are,
Mm,
to your own identity. So, for example, for the longest time, I didn't think I was smart enough, and that's because I was spoken to in a very negative way that made me feel that way, especially when it came to my performance in school. Now, my performance in school was never bad, it just wasn't good enough
mm,
for my parents. And so, um, you know, unkind words were often said. And so now I never thought I was smart enough, even when going up to high school, I was a straight A student,
mm,
but I didn't think I was smart enough. And because of that, there were opportunities that I passed up because I didn't think I was equipped. I didn't think I had the knowledge, the know how, the understanding to tackle those opportunities. Right. And that is because I had that mindset that I wasn't enough.
mm.
And that came from the learning that I received in my childhood. So these things can often get absorbed into our identities. A lot of the information that we receive from our environments as children. And when that happens, it can be like, of course, there are great things. There are great lessons and values we, of course, receive from our parents and environment as well. But it's usually the heavy negative things that often influences the way that we perceive ourselves, the way that we decide to show up in the world, how we perceive ourselves in relation to others. And we kind of take that with us through many different areas of our lives, our careers, our personal relationships, whether it be friendships or intimate relationships or familial relationships. Um, it kind of leaks into all areas of our lives. And I can attest to that because my personal relationships were a mess. They're so crazy. I was involved in toxic, highly toxic situations in my 20s. I'm in my mid 30s now, but in my 20s, my early 20s, my relationships were highly toxic. And that is because I didn't have the self-love, right? I didn't understand what a healthy dynamic looked like because that wasn't modeled for me.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I didn't understand my self-worth. I also did not realize that a lot of the things that I experienced in childhood, I kind of took them at face value, like, okay, yeah, these were really unpleasant experiences, but I didn't realize that I experienced trauma.
Mm.
I didn't realize that I experienced trauma, much less to realize that that trauma has affected my the way that I view myself, my self-concept, and the way that I chose to show up in the world,
And
right?
that's so many of us. We don't grasp, we don't comprehend
Yeah.
that we've experienced that we are experiencing trauma. It's
Yeah.
we're in it, and we don't know any different. We don't have any frame of reference for anything else.
Exactly.
And as I mentioned
Exactly.
earlier, we're in survival mode
Yeah.
often, and we're coping, you know, the best we can with what limited sense or understanding of the world and ourselves, and this limited range of experience that we've had up to this point in our
Yeah.
lives.
Exactly. Exactly. In a state of survival, and that was me for the
Yeah.
longest time. And as I said to you earlier, I was that person who thought that I was this shy, timid, introverted person, only to find out when I became aware that I experienced trauma and that I was exhibiting symptoms of PTSD. I didn't even know that PTSD was a thing for people like me. I've never been in the army. I've never experienced anything huge and catastrophic. Mental health back in the day, they kind of ascribe PTSD to things like that, to people who are in the military, who are in any of the armed forces, who has been involved in any huge catastrophic event, um,
Of
whether
course,
it
many
be,
too that is subjected to, like, especially physical and sexual
yeah,
trauma. It's
exactly,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I didn't, even with me, I experienced the sexual trauma, but I didn't realize, I still didn't, somehow the connection wasn't made that I experienced trauma and that I was traumatized and that I was exhibiting symptoms of PTSD. I wasn't aware of that. And so because of that, I was operating from that um, traumatized child mindset,
Mhm.
very much heavily fear based. And so that showed up in every aspect of my life, like literally everywhere. And,
Mm.
I didn't understand why there were repetitive patterns. Things keep repeating unpleasant experiences, unpleasant relationships, um, you know, opportunities falling through, or me not just being able to move forward in certain areas of my life. I kind of blamed myself. I was just like, what am I not getting? What am I not seeing? Why can't I get this right? And then, of course, it just perpetrated that thing whereby it's just like, I'm not enough.
Mm.
I'm not enough. And so it was just like a spiral of this repetitive pattern that I was going through that I couldn't solve, that I couldn't see the end to all of this or the meaning
Mm.
of all of this. I couldn't understand the meaning of all of this. But eventually, when I realized that I experienced trauma, I was exhibiting symptoms of PTSD. I was operating from that mindset, then I could begin to work backwards and to address where all of that came from, where those narratives came from, where those stories came from, the thought patterns, the way that I view myself, the way that I view the world, and the way that I chose to show up. Then I could begin to really examine these things and see what was true to the authentic part of myself versus the part of myself that experienced something that was detrimental to who I am authentically. So learning how to separate the two and like have that delineation whereby it's just like, okay, I recognize that I experienced this, but am I this thing?
Mm.
Right? Who do I want to be and what does this mean for me? So being able to do that and to um, also question what I thought was true, the stories and the narrative that I held to be true previously, things that kind of developed out of my own learning growing up and really assessing what that meant for me. Um, how does that feel for me? How does it feel in my body? How does it make me feel in general? Being able to assess a lot of the things, a lot of the values that I absorbed from my experience and seeing whether that was in alignment with who I am, that really helped as well to like get me back to that place whereby I can begin to unlearn a lot of the things and reprogram um, my mind and get to that place whereby I can now begin to practice self-love and self-compassion. Because even after realizing that I experienced trauma and that I was operating from this space, I didn't have the self-compassion or the patience, because now the first thing that happened for me was I went to blaming myself. I went to blaming myself for how could I not have seen this for so long, right? If I had seen it sooner, I could have fixed it. I wouldn't have made like X amount of mistakes if I had seen this much earlier, you know, if I had done this or that or the third. So I went to self blaming, right?
Mm.
That's the first thing that happened, even after realizing that, you know, these things aren't just happening to you. You are enough, but you had this mindset and you were operating from this mindset, so you couldn't see that. But
Mm.
I went to blaming myself. I didn't have the self compassion. So it took me a while. It took me a while. And I was saying before, coming from this place whereby I thought I was this timid, shy, introverted person, that identity was just a response to my environment. Um, most people who meet me, they would say, "Oh, you're really extroverted." But if you told me that up to 5 years ago, I'd be like, "No."
Wow.
If you saw my behavior and my body language in social settings, it would be off-putting because I would be to myself somewhere separate from everyone else, barely interacting with the environment or with people within the environment. And that just came out of a childhood whereby the environment was emotionally unsafe for me.
Yeah.
And so when I was then presented with situations whereby I felt emotionally unsafe, whereby I felt like it wasn't safe to be my authentic self, it wasn't safe to speak up, it wasn't safe to express myself, then I would climb up and I would go back into that shell. And that was my protective mechanism. So, yeah, definitely identify with everything that you just said. I mean, and of course, when you mentioned school experiences and going through all those things that we all go through during our formative years, when you go to school and you have your friends or your teachers, maybe it's bullying, or maybe you know your teachers sometimes don't say the best things. Sometimes they say things that are very disempowering,
Right.
to students, and that adds an additional layer to what
More
you already,
layering.
yeah, to what you experience at home. And I know, because I experienced that as well. I literally changed my career choice because of that, because I already had that programming that I wasn't enough, I wasn't smart enough, regardless of the fact that I got very good grades in school. But that was my programming, and the brain pretty much does what it's programmed to do, right? So that was the programming I operated from. And so I never thought I could be enough. So when I had a teacher telling me that I couldn't pursue my goal in medicine, of course I believed, because I wasn't good enough. I wasn't
Mhm.
smart enough, even though on paper it didn't say that. So, I think that pretty much everything you just said wrapped up
Yeah.
my experience like perfectly.
Wow. So I want to jump in. I tend to avoid reading from some of these articles that I'm creating, but there's a list of some key points. So I will refer to this article. I'll make it as brief as I can, but I just want to mention some of the key signs of lack of self-love. There's perfectionism, fear of failure, a lack of tolerance for mistakes. For instance, because we were subjected to so much criticism, many of us were constantly berating ourselves. We're focusing on all of our perceived flaws,
Yeah,
and we have this dialogue of negative self-talk.
that was
That's
me.
going. Yeah, yeah. And let's see, we neglect self-care. We don't get enough sleep. We don't eat right. We just tolerate all kinds of just whatever discomforts, and we neglect ourselves and our basic needs, and just we ignore our emotional needs. Let's see, toxic and abusive people. We tolerate people that mistreat us, say and do horrible things. We stay
Yeah.
in really abusive relationships that are detrimental to our well-being. We have difficulty saying no, even if something is not in our best interest or if it's harmful. We too often we acquiesce and we go along with things we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Again, the negative internal dialogue, challenges in setting boundaries. We have this excessive need for validation. We need this other people to validate, acknowledge us, because we lack this inner knowing of that, this inner sense of adequacy. We avoid, as Karsha, what you were mentioning earlier, as far as um, the avoidance of challenges because of fear.
Yeah.
This programming that it makes us feel that we either don't have the resources or we're not enough.
Hmm.
Often engaging in self-sabotaging behaviors because we don't feel worthy or deserving.
Yeah, I did that too.
Yeah, and so there's some many aspects of that, and one of the fact that we've gone through a lot of these kinds of experiences and they've cost us a great deal of hurt, upset, distress, and societally, there's this pattern, this tendency of just don't go there, don't feel it, don't acknowledge it, distract yourself. And we try to have some kind of positive self-image or see ourselves in some kind of positive light.
Yeah.
But we avoid, or so many of us, majority of us, tend to avoid the pain.
Yeah.
And so whether a relationship blows up on us, someone's treating us, they're being really shitty, someone ghosts us, somebody is mistreating us within the context of a relationship, or even professionally, just some of the workplace dynamics where people are just rude or condescending, or someone else gets a promotion even though we've worked so much harder in that we may be more competent than that other person. And because we carry this wounding, there's a way in which we just kind of emanate this vibe, and other people, whether conscious or not all that conscious, they pick up on us and they tend to react to us or treat us accordingly. Um, Another thing too is just the fact that there's we many of us possessing this insecurity is that we look for things outside of ourselves, whether it's the other person, the person we get into a relationship, or having the job and the income or the possessions or whatever, that we look to that for some external sense of validation to say, yes, I really am okay. Can't you see I got this and this and that? And so that means I got it together. And yet all these things can easily fall away.
Yeah.
And you just see, for instance, the war in Ukraine, and just a lot of these people are in Syria too, and many other countries. People had spent years in their education and their career and their families, and many are just losing everything or have lost damn near everything. Their
Yeah.
physical health, they're physically injured as a result of you know the the violence that has occurred, their homes, their loved ones, all these things, even here in the United States or Canada or Europe or whatever, where we have more stable lives, the things are much more insecure as far as career. There's layoffs. People just get fired right and left, and there's no real job security. And financially, things are pretty turbulent sometimes because like you had the banksters crash the economy in 2008 because the safeguard financial regulations were removed
Yeah.
because of the lobbying. So we need to be able to look within ourselves, to turn within ourselves. And what I have found is, there were times when, whether it was because a relationship was blowing up on me or things weren't working out professionally at the time in my profession, my work, things weren't going as well, certain periods. And as so many of us do, I felt terrible, like something's wrong. I'm fucking up, it's just
Yeah.
things are not working. But what I found is the more I could be present with these emotions, like what I truly felt in response to what didn't appear to be working at the time, I went into that pain. I was fully present with my authentic emotional responses, the sadness, the grief, the frustration, if a relationship wasn't working, or that devastation, or it could be career as well.
Yeah.
I would connect with this inner core being, and there was this sense of like, I am enough. And sometimes when we've experienced a lot of this abuse, maybe starting from childhood, or even if it begins later, we experience multiple ghostings or being rejected, or a person we've been in a relationship runs off with someone else. We go into that pain, we're fully present as we continue to breathe from the depth of it. And as this inner core being emerges, as we move through the pain, there's this deeper sense of acceptance, self-love, self-appreciation. Now, a lot of people get into trouble again because they deny, they disconnect from, they avoid the pain, they don't want to feel, they don't want to go there, they distract themselves.
Yeah.
But then those emotions don't get processed. They remain trapped in the body, they stay there. And that reinforces those negative self-perceptions. It holds those emotions in place that reinforce the negative self-perceptions. And also it magnetizes you to more shit, more abusive assholes, more, just things just blowing up on you, not working out on you and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So
Also,
true.
the fact that a lot of us, again, because we faced a lot of criticism and there were these, we internalize the expectations of our parents or whatever family members of our society, and we can be very critical and harshly critical of ourselves. And but again, by going into the feelings, processing the emotions, as I was describing, a lot of times, you know, we need to go into experiences. So many things that we attempt are not going to
Yeah.
work out the way we want them to, and we are going to make mistakes. That's just how we learn. There's this process of trial and error, and so we need to give ourselves permission to jump into experience and apply ourselves the best we can. And when things don't work as well, we reassess and we process how we're feeling about these experiences, our lived experiences, and our emotions. And as we do so, then we gain greater insight and understanding, and we come back and we reapply ourselves, and there's this refinement. I am kind of
Yeah.
breezing through because since you mentioned like you do have a time limitation here,
No, no
but
worries.
yeah. So, and that also the fact that the more, say, we get into a relationship and people are saying and doing hurtful things, one of the things I found is that the more I could be present with what I truly feel, whether if I was ghosted or someone's being an abusive asshole, just whatever, is as I work through my own emotional responses and also making use of various therapeutic interventions, the more I can be fully present with my authentic emotional responses and work through the
Yeah.
hurt, the grief, the fear of loss, all these emotions, what I found is it enabled me to dissolve, to let go of those unhealthy attachments. And there is over time this process of evolution where not only letting go of the unhealthy attachments, but in time, finding myself attracted to and attracting companions who were more loving, more caring, more accepting. As we evolve in this healing process, what happens is we develop this greater capacity to, when we hold the pain in our bodies, and we're more likely to do that when we suppress, deny, numb, disconnect from our feelings. And therefore, we're more likely to self-sabotage or do things that are self-destructive. We drink, we consume alcohol, we smoke cigarettes, or do other recreational drugs. We do all these things that are harmful, damaging to ourselves. The more of these emotions we hold in our bodies, then that drives, it fuels these self-destructive tendencies. So we need to be able to process or digest these emotions.
Yeah.
The more that we're able to do so, and that acceptance of love and compassion for ourselves begins to emerge, then we gravitate towards healthier people. We're better at self-care. We prefer healthier foods. We stop tolerating abusive people or dysfunctional, crazy dynamics or situations, it makes it easier for us to establish healthier boundaries, easier for us to say no when instead of going along with something that's not in our best interest.
Yeah.
Some people may question, like, am I being self-absorbed or narcissistic by this concept of self-love? And yeah, I understand it may seem a little foreign or weird because it's not what we're used to, but this is one of the most crucial steps of healing and caring for ourselves. And the fact that as we love ourselves more, that this is it has this we develop this capacity, like, because we didn't get a lot of our needs met along the way, say maybe from childhood, even if our parents were doing the best they could with the understanding they possessed.
Yeah.
There's ways as we turn within here. As I said, be present, acknowledge what's happening in your life, what you feel in response to it, dive into the depth of these feelings and sensations, where they're situated in your body, breathing softly and deeply as you digest, as you process these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the component of how we communicate with ourselves, how we talk with ourselves. When if you're caring for a child, hopefully you understand that they have limited experience, and so you're more understanding. Or even if you have a peer who's your age, you talk to them in a more supportive way, and so as you can be more kind and understanding to yourself when you have things haven't worked out quite the way you wanted to, just talking to yourself in a way that, okay, this is a learning process, and yes, I'm struggling, but we go through these experiences. And instead of, if you beat yourself up, if you're harshly critical of yourself, you're exacerbating the emotional wounding. But if you speak to yourself in a more kind, understanding, supportive way, and you commit to just taking the steps to heal, it helps these parts of yourself, as you were saying, Kertia, about not feeling safe. It helps you, these wounded parts of you, to feel more safer. And
Yeah.
you begin to develop this, again, as I said, it's like you're parenting these wounded, these vulnerable parts of yourself. And sometimes we need interventions too, because the wounding, the scarring, for many of us, it runs so profoundly deep. Like, I would do
Yeah.
this practice of working with the emotions, but the scarring for many of us is so deeply entrenched. Whatever resources, some of us, maybe it's starting out working with the psychotherapist, because we need that cognitive understanding of our dysfunctional family dynamics, of our emotional wounding, the dysfunction we're enacting, because many of us, we possess such a limited understanding. So this is a crucial piece. But even things like deep tissue massage, our bodies, we need care. Many of us
Mm-hmm.
are so dissociated, so disconnected. We need that physical bodily contact, but also a lot of the emotions, the traumas that we've experienced are stored in different parts of our body. And so doing the deep tissue massage helps to bring these emotions to the forefront, bring them up into our conscious awareness so we could begin to process them. I have found, as I said numerous other times, the most powerful interventions working with some of the gifted healers that I've worked with over the years, going through the Vision Quest, where I'm out the 4 days and nights, traditional Native American practice, fasting alone in the mountains without food and water, and feeling this extraordinarily powerful force descend into my body. Sometimes, like a near-death experience, these memories, the impressions of those events, all those highly charged emotions, all the vivid sensory impressions, everything's coming back.
Yeah.
But all that experience is being transformed in a way so I can thoroughly digest it. And it's building this foundation. The vision quest is too intense for most people. Some of you can work up to it though. But for many people I've worked with have said that when they've worked with me individually, they've experienced the same kind of transformation. And I can see this transformation occurring as people they develop this capacity to truly love and appreciate, feel compassion for themselves. As that happens, the unhealthy attachments dissolve and they attract people and experiences into their life that are more nourishing, nurturing.
Yeah.
They find themselves attracted to healthier foods. Another thing that's so important here, again, forgive me if I'm racing through this a bit, but since you mentioned you had a time constraint, uh, the importance of letting the love and appreciation in. And it could feel, again, weird and uncomfortable at first, but that's so important. It could feel awkward, but when people are demonstrating any kind of love or kindness and appreciation, still yourself, feel yourself just as best you can opening to be receptive to their kind acts, their acts of kindness, their words, little gestures of kindness. Feel yourself being open, receptive. Feel yourself being opening to allow that to come in and to nourish your body. That too is an important part that helps you to feed and sustain you.
Mm-hmm.
Few other things I wanted to mention. Let's see. Things, because I'm not going to remember everything here. Practice self-compassion by intentionally treating yourself with kindness, understanding, especially at times when you've made mistakes, you haven't succeeded at what you were attempting to do. Set and maintain healthy boundaries. I'm just summing this up real quick. As I said, and whether it's through exercise, meditation, healthy food choices, getting sufficient rest, self-care is so critically important. Cultivate practices, mindful practice. I mean, I do 2 hours of sitting meditation a day. Most of you are not going to do that much, but we go through so much craziness. There's so much
Yeah.
challenge we face in our lives. And we need this time to process or digest. Even if you could only do 15 minutes a day, just do what you can. The more time, the better, because you go a lot deeper. The more time you do, it's this practice gives you an opportunity to develop your body and mind. Acknowledge and appreciate yourself by recognizing the struggles that you faced. We go through tremendous amounts of craziness, shit, hardship, and so acknowledge that, appreciate like how you've weathered the storms. And again, whatever you go through, when things don't work out, process being present with, as I said, acknowledging whether it's feelings of anger or regret or frustration, whatever hasn't worked out, be present with those feelings, fully open to them, descend into the depths, breathe softly and deeply, stay with those feelings. You're not sprinkling fairy dust, you're not blowing them out of your body, just be with them. Keep breathing whatever time it takes, because as you do so, as you continue to do so, even if it takes weeks or months, you keep breathing into them. They go through this transformation as you digest them from within. This warmth, these emanations of warmth begin to emerge. And that's where a lot of the self-love and compassion comes from. Surround yourself with positive and supportive people. And it becomes easier to do because it's the love and compassion begins to emanate from yourself. Again, you let go of those unhealthy attachments and you begin to attract kinder and more nourishing people.
Mm-hmm.
Also, sometimes we have these negative, really toxic kinds of ways that we frame or interpret or view ourselves and our actions. And there's a really good book that I read, 2 books. One was called Mind Lines, Lines to Change Minds by L. Michael Hall and Bobby Bodenheimer, I think you say his name. And there's another one, Frame Games. That one's out of print, but on neurosemantics.com, it is talking about these cognitive frames that we operate with and how we interpret our life experiences, our typical thought patterns or structures. And we do have a certain capacity to choose how we frame or how we interpret our experiences and life events, or how
Yeah.
we see ourselves. And I found that to be very therapeutic because I recognized there are ways of my thinking by which I was tearing myself down. And I learned that I could adopt a mindset, ways of seeing and understanding myself that instead of being self destructive, I could build myself up,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging where I fell short, but in a way so that was more supportive, like the way you would guide a child through their development to learn and grow. Uh, Also important to pursue our passions, because a big part of self-love is really identifying what is it that you're truly passionate about. What are the things that you enjoy? Dance, yoga, rock climbing. What do you want to accomplish in your life? Do you want to pursue medicine? As you said, Kersha, that was your desire early on. What
Mm-hmm.
is your deepest passion? And many of us will face all kinds of adversity or challenges in terms of accomplishing these things. But as I said, these feelings come up, be with them, be present, breathe into them, digest them, and make use of the healing interventions. I've faced tremendous adversity, but I do my practice. I've been going back to the mountain for years, going through the vision quest, and I keep building that foundation stronger. And continually just, it's like, as I said, what is it that you want to do? What do you most desire in life? And continually, to the best of your ability, continue to strive for that. In doing so, it's saying to yourself, I am worthwhile, or in your case, you are worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
That by taking the steps to do what it is you're truly passionate about. And and also, the more that you heal, you go through this healing process and you develop this greater self-love, appreciation, acceptance, compassion. You develop a greater capacity. The Buddhist tradition, you become the bodhisattva, that you develop this compassion, that you could show up in the world, that you can make a difference,
Yeah.
show love, and to nourish, to nurture, to care for other people. And one of the things that I'm passionate about, I have spoken about numerous occasions, like so many people, they're going out and they're getting their poodles and schnoodles and shih tzus, and all these dogs that are being bred. It's contributing to this overpopulation of dogs, and yet there are just thousands or millions of dogs in shelters, beautiful animals that are sadly, many are on doggy death row. And even
Mm-hmm.
if it's a no kill shelter, it's still, they're suffering. And before you go and get one of these breeds, go look in the shelter. Also, so many people, like in India, where I've spent a lot of time, it's this, in many cultures, this big thing about, having children, especially boy babies. I got to have a son. And it's like,
Yeah.
damn, there are so many children in the world that don't have parents to love and care for them. And our world is dangerously overpopulated. It cannot sustain our rate of consumption. And instead of adding more stress on the planet, just look around you, and easily take in care for a child in need, or even if you are not raising the child, you can make a difference in the life of a child or an elderly person
Yeah.
or a homeless person. What difference can you be making? So oftentimes, there's this, we may need to start with ourselves, or often we do have to start with ourselves, but
Mhm.
in addition, what steps can you be taking to make a positive difference in the lives of others? Kertia,
Love that.
what do you want to add? I know you have.
No, I think I'll just sum up quickly. Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. A lot of us we're so disconnected from ourselves, so it's really easy to latch on to a lot of things that are external to us, whether it be a status, a title, material objects, the overconsumption of certain things, or even just the habits that we have sometimes. So when you're so disconnected from yourself, and or you find you have such a hard time connecting with your emotions and allowing yourself to feel your emotions, to process them, and to kind of understand what those emotions are truly about, where they originate, um, what is triggering them. And so it's really important to understand these things, but it takes it takes a huge level. Oh my gosh, sorry. It takes a huge level of self-awareness, and that comes with first just sitting with yourself.
Mhm.
It comes with just being able to sit with yourself, just turn off all the distractions, get away from the screens, get off of social media for a little bit, turn the TV off for an hour or so, and sit with yourself. And it's
Refrain from. I'm just adding in. Refrain from lighting up,
yeah,
or drinking, or whatever you're using to self
yeah,
medicate.
to numb yourself, to numb your emotions, to numb your feelings, to numb the pain, or to distract yourself from your current
Shopping,
reality. Yeah.
scrolling.
So a lot of those things, a lot of the habits that we tend to get into on a daily basis, that keeps us distracted, and that, um,
Binge eating,
yeah,
Netflix.
all of the above.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's very important to disconnect from all of that, to just be able to reconnect with ourselves, and to um, get that quietness, just sit in that quietness. I know a lot of people, they're not into meditating, or they don't think much of it, or they find it difficult, but just sitting in quiet alone, it helps.
Uh-huh.
If you're not at that stage whereby you are ready to embrace meditating, or maybe you're just not comfortable with it yet for whatever reason, just sitting with yourself, away from distractions, away from the numbing agents, um, can kind of help to just help you to reconnect a little bit more to yourself, and to bring yourself to a certain level of awareness, to kind of assess what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. And maybe that could be the beginning point to you uncovering just another layer of who you are and your experience, and the meaning to all of this, right? So you got to start from somewhere. And I think that's a really good place to start.
Right.
I gotta
That's
have
Yeah. We got to wrap up here. And thank you for being such a trooper and showing up even in the midst of a flu.
Oh my gosh, yes, it's bad. It's terrible, and there's a snowstorm outside, and I gotta run.
Okay. Okay. So thank you for joining me today, Karsha. Thank you for all those of you out there in YouTube land or wherever you're listening from. And just like, subscribe, check out Karsha's podcast as well. You'll find the link below. Oh, and there's a much more in-depth article that I didn't have a chance to cover everything. Read the article.
Yes, yes, an amazing article. We can also come on another time and get more deeply into the article and everything that you have to
Oh,
say.
we'll have other articles. There's
Yeah,
so much to cover.
you have so many great things to say. So we can also do this again. It'll be a pleasure.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you again.